Well, again, thank you, Emily, Dr. Emily Jamea on the Toddcast now. Your Instagram bio, expert in love and libido, which is the name of your podcast, Love and Libido.
Yep.
Therapist, speaker, author. Which of those eats up most of your time during the day?
These days I would say my work day is kind of split between seeing clients and working on the podcast. There's a lot there. And then, I have a monthly sex column with healthy women, and everything else is just sort of piecemealed together. But I would say for sure working with clients and my podcast.
And what are the sort of attributes? And I'm going to get to a ton of follower questions. I've got a lot of questions for you.
Yay.
Like what are the attributes that you would need to get into sex therapy? Is it like a good ear? Is it a dirty mind? Is it a unique perspective on relationship? Is it like a combination of all three?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think people enter the field for so many different reasons. There's a lot of different motivations why people become interested in it. I can share my experience. And that was that I was studying psychology in my undergraduate program, and I took a human sexuality elective. And I just found it to be really fascinating. I think our sexuality is so intrinsically wound up in our psychology, and it drives so much of human behavior, and it's so important to relationships. And so for me, I thought, wow, this is something that would be really neat to focus on, because sexuality can be kind of a window into a person's psyche. You can learn a lot about an individual and about a relationship by learning about sexuality for that person and what it means for them. And so from that point forward, I really just focused all of my work on sex and relationships. And so for me, it's just a niche, just like another therapist might specialize in eating disorders or in depression. I specialize in sex and relationships.
Okay. And I have a ton of great questions here for you. So
okay.
As soon as I mentioned you're going to be a guest, I would say I got a good 10 anyway for you.
Awesome.
Patrick says, why do all the girls I know friend zone me? What am I doing wrong?
Interesting. I mean, it's hard to answer without having a little bit more information, but I think I had a question come through that was kind of similar to this, that it was a guy who was so afraid of coming off as like predatory or pushy that he kind of like disconnected from his sexual energy when interacting with women. And I'm just wondering if maybe that could be what's happening a little bit here. Obviously we needed the Me Too movement, and a lot needs to change in terms of consent and patriarchy and all of those things. But I think a lot of men feel a little inhibited or scared to come off too strong. And so it's a really fine line, I think, between developing the skills you need to communicate an interest sexually and to flirt and to find banter and to make that clear for people. And so I'm wondering if maybe it's that, if that is in part what might be going on for this guy.
Could be also the other side of the coin, where he's just a bit of a pushover. Like, again, we don't really know the specifics of Patrick.
Yeah, hard to say.
Here, but maybe it's just that he needs to take the bull by the horns.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. Like, be a little more assertive, and people can be assertive and clear about their interest while also, being respectful and, maintaining boundaries. But it's something a lot of times I think people just have to experiment with, trial and error before they can find a good balance between the two.
Yeah. You're going to love Brad's question. How long should you wait before dating a friend's ex? Is there an acceptable time frame?
Oh man, that's a great question. I don't know that there's like a right answer to that. I would say you need to talk to your friend and, make sure it's not going to somehow negatively impact the friendship. If it's a really close friend, there's a good chance that they may not really feel comfortable with that. That could create some awkwardness,
cool with that, at all.
So, yeah, you may not be. Other people may have absolutely no issue with it. I think everybody is a little bit different. I always try to, I don't encourage being possessive about people and, certainly not in relationships, but sometimes things get a little awkward after a breakup. And so, you can imagine how that might feel for the ex-girlfriend and your friend. Like if the three of you were hanging out together, that might be a little bit uncomfortable. And so my advice would be to talk to your friend first and see how it would affect the friendship and how they would feel about it before making that call.
Sharon says, I recently broke up with my boyfriend of 6 years and I can't get physical with a man. I lack trust. Help me gain it
Mm.
back.
Oh, man. Yeah. So, going through any kind of betrayal in a relationship can create a lot of fear and anxiety when starting something new. I mean, no one likes to be hurt. No one likes to be rejected. And
Actually,
certainly
six
no
years a
one,
long time. That's a
yeah,
long
6
relationship.
years. Exactly. That is a long time. I wonder if maybe some individual work would be a good first step for this person. I do think a lot of healing can come from a healthy relationship, but if at this point she's too scared to start anything because maybe she's been traumatized by what happened in the previous relationship, it may be a good first step to work with a therapist to get some help processing what her experience was and develop some coping skills and some clarity about what she needs to do to enter her next relationship in a way that feels safe. But, eventually it's one of those things you got to kind of jump in. I think it can be really helpful to look back and identify what maybe some of the red flags were so that you don't make the same mistakes again. And a good therapist can help a lot with that.
Right. We're talking with Dr. Emily Jamea, emilyjamea.com, or is dremilyjamea.com is your website as well?
It's emilyjamea.com.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Christine says, can you tell us about female Viagra?
I can tell you there is no such thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Believe me, the pharmaceutical companies are working really hard to create a female Viagra, but there's really nothing good available on the market. There was a drug that came out a few years ago that was kind of marketed as the female Viagra, but not that many women noticed much of a positive effect from it. Plus, you couldn't have a drink if you took the medication. Plus, it was causing low blood pressure and people were passing out. So a lot of people sort of realized, maybe the benefits here aren't really worth the side effects.
Mm.
And we also need to be careful when we're marketing anything or describing anything as a female Viagra. What Viagra does is help a penis become erect. It works on arousal. And what I think a lot of people are wanting a female Viagra for is to boost desire, which is a little bit of a different phenomenon. And there are so many factors that affect one's desire for sex. And what we find is, you can pump a guy full of testosterone all day long. If he is too anxious, if there is too much stress going on at work, or there can just be a million things that can actually ride the effects of things like testosterone or Viagra in that guy's desire or ability to get an erection. And so you always want to ask yourself first, what could be impacting my sexual desire? Is it my individual health? Is it my mental health? Are there relationship dynamics at play that maybe aren't making me feel very attracted to my partner? Is there conflict? Am I getting adequate sleep at night? Am I getting enough exercise? Am I stressed out all the time? Is work putting a lot of pressure on me? Are kids putting a lot of pressure on me? So there could just be so many things that influence desire. And at this time, we don't have a medication that can overpower lifestyle for a lot of people. So yeah, believe me, they're working on it,
They're
but so
working.
far we haven't struck gold.
All right. Now I think this one kind of spins into what Amy is asking. She says, my new boyfriend isn't circumcised. It's the first I've been with that isn't. I'm weirded out. Can't bring myself to go down there.
Oh man. Yeah. It's interesting. I just had a question come through on my podcast where we explored this exact topic. And the person who put the question was uncircumcised and had some, partners who had kind of a negative response. So I think it's important to remember that circumcision still the majority of people in the US do get circumcised, but only about 60%. So there's a good
Mhm.
40% of people who aren't circumcised. And the number of people who are getting circumcised is going down in the US. A lot of people now consider it kind of a form of genital mutilation. As it stands, the American Academy of Pediatrics, I think, does still recommend it, or at least they say that getting, a baby boy circumcised can help lower the transmission of STDs and that it keeps things cleaner. But if you're with someone who has good personal hygiene, an uncircumcised penis is no less clean than a circumcised penis. And remember that when an uncircumcised penis becomes erect, you really can't tell that much of a difference between a penis that is circumcised because the foreskin pulls back. And so it doesn't really look that any different. But globally, only about 1/3 of males are circumcised. So if you hook up with someone in Europe or South America or Asia, chances are they aren't going to be circumcised. So I think there's still a lot of like stigma about uncircumcised penises here in the US. But the key thing is hygiene. If you're with someone who isn't taking very good care of themselves, then, that's something to consider. But that would be the case if they were circumcised as well. But it really isn't any different. A lot of women actually find that it can kind of enhance sensation because there's kind of a ribbing effect that occurs during vaginal intercourse. And so a lot of people end up really liking it. So I would encourage you to release any stigma you have about uncircumcised penises and have fun with your partner, and don't do or say anything that is going to make him feel bad about his body. That's a big no.
Jump on it, Amy.
Yeah.
Shane says, I love PDA, but my wife would rather wait till we get home. I can't even kiss her in public. How can I get her to warm up to the idea?
Oh, great question. I think it kind of depends on the context. I would encourage him to talk to his wife. I think there's a lot of room for collaboration here. It may be that it's a hard no for her to like make out at a public park, but maybe she would be comfortable with a, kiss or hand holding while sitting at the bar having cocktails. I think that I would encourage you to just talk to her a little bit more about what the hard limits are around PDA and where maybe you can find some room for compromise, and really understand what her issue is with PDA. I think a lot of times we hear a person's no and the conversation ends there, but understanding why, I think, could, yield a deeper dialogue about what some of the concerns are.
Yeah.
And likewise, I'd encourage you to explore why it's important for you to have more PDA. What is that doing for you? Why does it matter so much? I think when you get to the root of the motivation, then you can find a little bit more ground for compromise.
Yeah, because it almost makes you wonder, like, what is it that they don't like? Why can't you peck your wife on the cheek in
Mhm.
public? Why can't you pat her on the ass and, all the stuff you
Sometimes
do at home?
it's cultural. And, I'm wondering like if his wife comes from a culture where their, public displays of affection are kind of frowned upon, or they're like no, or just not, socially acceptable.
Right.
There are certainly cultures where that's the case. And so it's important to understand why.
Yeah. Cam says, my girlfriend can't get past the fact I'm still friends with my ex. I'm not screwing around on her. I want to stay with her, but this jealousy is overwhelming. Any
Mm.
advice?
Yeah. So when it comes to friends of the opposite sex, and this is especially true if you want to maintain friends with an ex, you always want to ask yourself, is this person a friend of me alone? Or are they a friend of the relationship? If this is an ex who maybe you're confiding in about problems you're having with your current partner, and maybe the three of you aren't spending a ton of time together, you might want to kind of reevaluate why it's so important for you to stay friends with this person, and really if they are someone who is accepting of your current partner and your current relationship. I also think that it kind of depends how long the relationship has been over. I mean, if it was just a few months ago that you've had a sexual relationship with this person, that can feel kind of intimidating for a new partner to enter into. And so it may mean that you need kind of a cooling off period for a while and maybe a little bit of distance before bringing this person back into your life. And when you do bring that person back into your life, always try to make it a group thing. So I think that's really what will minimize any feelings of jealousy or discomfort that your current partner might have. If it's, an ex from middle school that you're friends with, then, I would say the current partner maybe needs to reassess what feels threatening about that. So it kind of depends on what the situation is.
All right. Crystal, last question for followers, and I want to get into your life a little bit. I know I've only got you for another maybe 5-10 here.
Sure.
So Crystal goes, how can I get my husband to try new things in the bedroom? We've been together almost 20 years. He's a missionary kind of guy. I would love to try new things.
Yeah. So I talk a lot about actually just a little bit about this in my online workshop. So it's so important to have kind of a wider sexual script. A lot of times people find what works and they stick to that script. But the reason that that's a problem is because eventually you might find that something doesn't work the way you expect. Let's say you're always a missionary guy, but you injure your shoulder. It might be hard to get into that position. If you don't have your feet wet on what it's like to explore different kinds of things, then you might find that you're stuck and don't really know what to do. Part of what keeps sex exciting in long-term relationships is a little bit of sexual novelty and variety. I think a lot of people here try new things and their mind jumps to extreme kink. And a lot of times that's not really what people want or need. It could be. And if so, that's something to talk about. But it's also really important to take baby steps. We know that you don't need to do anything big or grand to create a feeling of excitement and newness. Sometimes doing something that's just like 4% different from what you typically do is enough to create a feeling of excitement and even induce a feeling of flow, which is kind of that like out of body, fully absorbed experience that a lot of people want to have during sex. What I do is I have these like really lengthy handouts of all kinds of different things you might do sexually. And I have people check a box if it's something they currently do. You check another box if it's something you want to do more of. You check a box if it's something you don't currently do, but you want to try. You can put an X in a box if it's something that's like a hard no for you. But you want to remember that you and your partner are partners, and that includes sex as well. And if you're totally unwilling to work as a team when your partner wants to try something different, then that's going to create a lot of tension in the relationship. Sexual satisfaction and relationship satisfaction are really strongly linked. And so if one person is chronically sexually dissatisfied, it's going to spill over into the relationship. You might find that your partner is a little more irritable. It can cause like feelings of depression for people. It's pretty important. So I always encourage people to be a little bit flexible. A lot of times you can find areas that you want to assess whether it's something you're at least open to versus something that's a hard no. And a lot of times you can identify things that you're at least open to trying a couple of times before ultimately deciding maybe it's not for you.
Mm. And of course, more information always at your website too, right? EmilyJamea.com.
Yep. Yeah.
So let's get outside of sex therapy and relationship advice and what you're known for.
Okay.
What was the music in your house as a kid growing up? What are
Oh
the bands
gosh.
your parents were playing?
So my mom, she loved like oldies. And so I remember being in the car with her listening to like oldies, the Beatles, things like that from like the 50s and 60s. My dad is Cuban, and even though he was primarily raised in the US, he was born in Cuba. And so I also have memories just being at my grandmother's house and there being, Cuban music, salsa, that kind of thing playing. So very different, I would say, but I had a good, and my dad himself, he liked like, rock and roll. And so there was definitely like Mick Jagger in the car rides with him.
Yeah. And what was your first concert that you went to?
My first concert was, I think it was Alanis Morissette.
Oh,
Yeah, or it might have been the Red Hot Chili Peppers, one of the two. I think they happened around the same time, but yeah, I mean, I had that whole Jagged Little Pill album like memorized, and so that was a fun concert.
yeah. And that
Yeah.
was, I guess Taylor Hawkins would have been the drummer for Alanis Morissette at that point. Taylor Hawkins is the drummer
Mhm.
for Foo Fighters, who just recently died.
Oh, I did not know that. Oh, that's
Yeah,
really
he
sad.
he was found in his hotel room in Bogota.
Oh my gosh.
I
That's
know, right?
terrible.
Like, what?
Yeah,
One of the biggest
I
rock
didn't
bands
hear
on the
that.
planet. How the hell did
Yeah.
that happen?
Oh man.
When you find time, what are you binge watching lately?
Okay, let's see. Oh, I just watched White Lotus actually for the second
Oh,
time. I think that show is hysterical. It's a really dark comedy for anyone who hasn't seen it, but I just thought the casting in that series was superb. Like, I think the writer wrote the roles for the actors that he picked,
oh, for
and
sure,
it was
right?
just, yeah, it was so funny. I watched that. Before that, I watched Succession. That was a good one. Sometimes it's hard for my husband and I to find shows we both like, so we
Oh,
need
it's
something new.
impossible. My wife and I, she's always wants the drama, and she wants, like,
Yes,
you know,
yes,
the relationship stuff,
yeah,
where I'm like, I
yeah,
just want action. I just want action. I want some comedy.
yeah.
It's
It's the
really tough to
same.
find. It's really tough to
Totally,
find.
totally. Yep.
How about sports? Do you get into sports? Which is your team, if you are?
I am not a huge sports person. I
Yeah.
live in Houston. So, of course, like if a team's doing well, cheer them on. Like, the Astros went to the World Series a few years ago. Like, that was exciting. But yeah, we're not a huge sports family.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah. Hmm.
If you could have a superpower, which power would you want to have?
Probably like being able to see the future because I'm
Mm.
always like wondering what's going to happen. And it's something I'm constantly working on.
But you could only have it for, like, maybe you could see like a day, 2 days,
Yeah,
3 days.
exactly. A little bit in advance. And then
Yeah.
flying. I mean, I don't know. I have dreams that I can fly, and that always feels amazing. That would
That's
be a fun one too.
People say that. I've never ever had a dream where I'm flying ever.
Really? Oh gosh, it's
And I
nice.
also don't remember my dreams. Like, why don't people remember dreams? Do you know that?
Probably means you're sleeping really deeply and that you're not anxious. So I think there's evidence that people who have more vivid dreams are people who are a little, the mind just has a harder time calming down to get
Oh,
kind of in that deep sleep. So that's actually a good sign if you're
y-
sleeping deep enough, you don't remember your dreams.
I don't go to sleep until I literally have to, though.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like fighting to stay awake, and
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you believe aliens have visited Earth, or maybe they even live among us?
I believe there's some kind of extraterrestrial life. I can't say I believe aliens have visited the Earth. I wouldn't say that
Yeah,
definitively, but yeah, I know people see some kind of spooky things in the sky every now and then, but I think we would know. I
I think
think
so
we
too.
would
Yeah.
know.
All right, I'll respect your time here. A couple more questions, and
Okay,
we'll
sure.
wrap it up.
Okay.
I want you to share a near-death story with us, where you're like, "Holy
Oh,
crap, I could have just died."
yeah. Okay. So let's see, I think I was like 14, 13 or 14. And I was living in Tennessee at the time, and I was supposed to fly to Houston, where I now live, which is where a lot of my extended family lives. And we get to the airport, and I'm having this like pain in my chest. Now, granted, I'm like 13, 14 years old. So it's not like my parents were that worried about it. They said maybe it's just some indigestion, take some Tums or whatever. But I just was not feeling right at all. And I finally said, I'm not comfortable going. I was supposed to fly with my cousin. We were going to fly alone, I think. I said, I don't want to go. Something is wrong. So I didn't go. And my parents took me to the doctor, and it turned out I had it's called like a pneumomediastinum, which is where somehow it could have been just like an overstrain. Maybe I lifted something too heavy, but like a little hole forms between your lungs and your heart. And so air was like leaking out of my lungs into the sac around my heart. And the doctor said that if I had flown on the descent, there's a chance that there could have been like a major health complication, like a stroke or something like that. And so it was just kind of one of those always listen to your body kinds of situations.
Isn't that like incredible that at a
I know.
teenager you're like, nah,
Yeah,
I
I was like,
can't.
no,
This is
not gonna
off.
do it. Yeah, yeah. So I'm thankful my parents didn't like push me too hard, and
Wow.
it's one of those things that just heals by itself, and I'm totally fine now. But that could have been scary.
Could have been,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Last one's probably the toughest. It's always the toughest for everybody.
Okay.
Can you nail it down to one career highlight? Is that even possible?
One career highlight. Oh my gosh. Let me think about that. I got interviewed for Oprah magazine once. That was really exciting.
Cool.
It wasn't, of course, by Oprah herself, but
Yeah,
to at least be named in Oprah magazine, that was a big one. That's like always first on my list of like Emily's expert opinion has been featured in. It's always
sure.
Oprah magazine #1.
Yeah, yeah.
I had the opportunity to meet Lisa Ling once, which was really exciting. She was the keynote speaker at an event that I was a conference speaker at. And so I had the opportunity to meet her. And she is such, I think, an incredible journalist. And she covers a lot, with sexuality. And so that was a really cool experience as well. I'd say those might be my two main highlights
Yeah.
so
It's
far.
cool to think about the
Yeah.
stuff you've done, hey?
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully there's even bigger highlights on the
Well,
horizon.
there'll be more along the way for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you again for taking some time this morning to join us. Dr. Emily Jamea. You're simply Dr. Emily Jamea on Instagram and Twitter. Your website is
I don't
emilyjamea.com.
tweet that much. I don't tweet
Yeah,
that
I
much, but I
noticed
am
that.
on TikTok. I do
I was actually
TikTok.
gonna bring
Yeah.
that up. Come over to
Yeah.
the dark side.
I
Twitter's fun too.
can't add another social media account, but
I
yeah,
know,
you'll
isn't
find
it
me on it.
sometimes just feel like
It's a
overwhelming
lot. Yeah, but
listening
you'll find me
on,
on Instagram and TikTok.
but your Instagram's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Have a great day, and I guess we'll see you online.
All right. Thanks, Todd. Appreciate being here.